There's a particular kind of silence that follows when we all let all the applause die down, and you notice that the expectations finally fade away. The sort of quiet that makes you ask, beneath every persona, every performance, if the crowd disappeared, who would I be? Most of us spend so much energy becoming what others want that the honest answer feels almost out of reach or impossible. Maybe you sense this moment creeping in late at night or when life drops you off somewhere unfamiliar and suddenly you realize that you've never really asked yourself what you believe, what truly matters, independent of all the noise. So let's talk about solitude, not forced isolation or surface level loneliness. I mean, the kind where you choose to let go of the noise and just face yourself. Our culture has a script. If you're alone, you must have failed. Quote, find your team, find your tribe, build your network, end quote. As if meaning comes only from being surrounded. But consider that perhaps real meaning just starts when you're brave enough to strip it all of that stuff away and learn that what's left when it's just you and the silence and what that might mean. Well, Alan Watts was a English or British philosopher and lecturer, somewhat of an entertainer in the 70s, I believe. He said a person with no support can become unstoppable. And if you think about it, isn't that kind of what happened or what we've created with the figure of Jesus? No support except for that with God. He isn't talking about the coldness or talking about running away from love or from institutions or from society. What Watts is talking about means when you get real about where approval ends and where genuine presence begins, and you watch the natural world. The river runs, whether anyone's watching or not. The oak tree reaches for the sun because that's its truth, that's its nature. Real power isn't granted by applause, it comes from stillness and the grit that you find sometimes on your own. It's easy to mistake comfort for real connection. We put up walls. We compromise ourselves. We make alliances. We get praise. We give praise. And we tell ourselves that we're secure, we're safe, we're accomplished. But sometimes those shields become traps or cages or even worse, a prison. Useful, familiar, but never maybe quite belonging to us or aligned with who we really are. The only way to know yourself is to risk standing alone, to let the applause die down and feel what's beneath. Most people avoid that space, and I did that for years, but it does teach you this. Authenticity grows in the discomfort. Sometimes it's forged when you hold the sadness and boredom and regret, and when you refuse to escape or distract. That's when sometimes you start to hear your own voice, which might sound rusty at first, but you know, it's yours. That time, that voice anchors you. You stop seeking approval in places that can't authentically give it to you. You can't get something from others that you can't give yourself first. You realize just because you're not surrounded no longer means that you're empty. Isolation doesn't mean failure. Isolation sometimes, well, that's the workshop where your character gets built in peace and difficulty, both. So when life shakes and you don't scramble to rebuild the old supports, you know what remains: your choices, your presence, even your fears. Once welcomed, they can become the foundation for the next chapter. But here's the truth: clarity born in solitude, that's only the spark. What comes next is more challenging and ultimately more rewarding. Deciding which ideals and principles will actually shape your path forward. Well, this one thing to know. What comes next is more challenging and ultimately more rewarding. Deciding which ideals and principles will actually shape your path forward. It's one thing to know who you are when the world is quiet, but it's a different strength when the world is quiet. It's one thing to know who you are when the world is quiet. It's a different strength entirely to step back into the noise and choose to be guided not by old habits or fleeting moods, but by values that hold steady through highs and lows. The next stretch isn't just self knowledge, it's asking what matters enough to live for. What codes or convictions can anchor you in the swirl of daily life? That's where the work of self discovery meets the real world. That's bigger than survival, bigger than you. So the journey doesn't pause at learning who you are or deciding what you stand for. The real challenge unfolds as you walk those principles out in the world. It's only when your values become woven through your actions that something fundamental shifts. You maybe like finding your own center, but letting that quiet clarity ripple out. Integrity, when lived, not just believed or thought about, moves beyond the self. People feel it. Your presence becomes permission for others to slow down, to breathe, to believe their own strength is possible too. This is where you can stop carrying your growth in secret and begin to embody it. It's not about grand gestures or stirring speeches or TED Talks. It happens every time that you're on that you're on the inside, and that starts shaping the space around you. Each choice, each interaction, each honest moment lights the way for someone else without needing recognition or applause or transformation. Your transformation becomes an invitation to others to live. It's a living reminder that healing, resilience, and authentic connection can be real for anyone willing to try. And that's the doorway. All that inner work and those private reckonings beginning to shine, letting them shine outward. It's not something that you force or perform. It's the quiet presence of a person anchored by their own journey. Someone who, simply by showing up authentically, helps others find the courage to continue on their own. All that inner work, all those private reckonings begin to shine outward. It's not something you force or perform. It's the quiet presence of a person anchored by their own journey. Someone who, simply by showing up authentically, helps others find the courage to begin to continue on their own. There comes a point when all that inner work, all those private moments of struggle and clarity start to shine outward. And that's not something you orchestrate. It's the quiet mark of a person who's wrestled with solitude, chosen meaningful principles, and kept showing up. A person who has grown not just for themselves, but for everyone that they meet. You stop needing to project strength, and simply living honestly becomes the lesson. The people around you don't always need your advice. Often they just need your calm. They need to see what's possible to move through the chaos with heart and not harden. That influence, just being present and grounded, lifts others up. It's legacy building, but without the ego. Look at what it is: loud, distracted. Or look at the way the world is: loud, distracted, fake, full of presentations, almost always reaching for the next quick fix, whether it's fundamentally sound or not. Most people keep chasing approval, achievement, and anything to fill the emptiness. Distractions. But underneath it all, they're quietly searching for something real. What's rare isn't invincibility or being untouched by hardship. It's that steady courage to carry the whole mosaic, joy and pain, beauty and loss, with dignity and an open heart. When you choose to stay gentle instead of hardening, to show up even in those things that are uncertain, it gives others permission to do the same. Living from wholeness doesn't mean having it all figured out. It means letting your imperfect, unfinished story become a path others can find hope on. When you stand honest and rooted in your values, you listen deeply. Or when you refuse to turn away from discomfort, those small moments matter more than any grand gesture. It's planting seeds just by being real. None of this is about being a hero. It's about presence, letting the clarity and compassion earned by doing your own work ripple outward. At the end of this journey, that's what being transcendent means. It's walking through life with a quiet strength, offering space for others to find their way, and believing that, even in the mess of it all, there's a kind of beauty that's undeniable. Every time that you lead with authenticity and kindness, you help create a world a little less afraid and a little more whole. This is how a person becomes more than the sum of their solitude, and more than just a follower of principles. They become a quiet catalyst, a steady invitation for others to come home to themselves too. And that's the legacy of the inner work, not perfection, but honest, lived examples that moves quietly from one life to the next. Let's get honest about solitude. I mean, I'm not talking about loneliness. I'm talking about that tough, honest space where the noise falls away and you see yourself, maybe for the first time, without all the borrowed stories. I'm sharing some thoughts here that Alan Watts used to describe what happens when there's no more support, no more script, and every outside prop is gone or pulled out from underneath you. That's when you find the part of yourself that doesn't crack, your own mountain, your genuine center that doesn't need approval to stand. All of us at some point get tangled up in a net of approval and routine until something in life snaps. A relationship changes, a job ends, or the quiet finally sets in. When you run out of lines to recite, only then do you actually meet yourself. There's a discomfort there. But if you stay in it, past that urge to flee, what rises is a strength that's not yours alone, and it can't be taken away. Not in dominance or defense, but in the gentleness of staying with yourself moment by moment, whether anyone notices or not. This is where presence gets real, not the kind that wins likes or crowds, but the steady turn or hum in your bones. Presence that says, even if no one is around or no one understands, I still exist and I matter. With this, you stop worrying who stays or goes. Stop measuring yourself by passing company, because here you've learned it means to belong deep with your own story, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on applause or company. It is its own reward. But the story doesn't end in solitude, and that's just the start. When you can hold your own in silence, the next question is, how will you move forward? What principles do you choose to follow now? And whose voice will help steer your path? Freedom isn't just about having no one to answer to. It's deciding intentionally who and what truly deserves your devotion. And that's what draws us into the conversation about higher principles. Not more performing, but more truth, more substance at the core. These are the crossroads where internal freedom becomes an act of conscious alignment. Now that you've learned to stand alone, the next step is choosing your guides, not out of habit, but with your eyes wide open. Which principles truly resonate beneath the ever-changing surface of culture? Which values hold up when all the easy answers run out? That's when certain teachings endure, like those in the Sermon on the Mount, not just as old rules to follow, but as living questions that demand your own sincerity. They challenge you to consider what you bring to pain, how you treat others when there's nothing at stake, how you handle anger and pride when those emotions risk cutting you off from deeper truths. Instead of pretending that you're above suffering, they invite you to grieve, to mourn, to finally stop resisting what's real and let it open the door to compassion. Compassion, not sentiment, but the patience to stay present in your own pain so you can recognize it in others. Meekness in this sense isn't weakness, it's presence. It's a confidence that doesn't need to overpower, but instead moves with quiet certainty, shaping the world more by integrity than by volume. Living these principles is about recognizing your own limitations, being honest about where you fall short, and doing it without self-hatred. Integrity isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily openness to examine your motivations, to hunger for a kind of righteousness that hums beneath appearances. It's learning to choose wisdom over impulse, presence over distraction, forgiveness over self-righteousness, and to keep returning to this work, no matter how messy or incomplete you may feel. Gradually, those internal shifts start to bleed out into your real life. They reshape your patience with others, your willingness to remain soft, even when things get hard, your day-to-day choices about what you say and what you do when nobody's keeping score. The standards you choose in silence, humility, simplicity, and honesty become the way that you move amongst others without needing validation. They change how you handle recognition, how you give or don't give, how you pray, not for show, but from somewhere that you're not performing. Even in chaos, you can find the return to your center when envy or anger flares or anxiety about tomorrow takes over. You remember roots go deeper than moods. You start to recognize what matters in others as well. Without forcing belief, you offer them space to wrestle with it as well. Living from those principles doesn't mean avoiding hard truths. If anything, it makes you braver about facing your own and gentler toward the shortcomings and fears you notice in other people. And as you keep working with these ideas and feelings, sometimes failing, sometimes finding moments of real resonance in those places, you'll notice that there's some private growth translating into something more outward, a kind of magnetism that you don't have to manufacture or push or force. Your values start to shape your world in little ways, in the honesty of your presence, the steadiness that you carry into confusion, the patience that you show when in conflict, and the way that you forgive and understand, and then maybe begin again, both with yourself and with others. That's the heart of it, not performance or dogma, but the slow process of taking principles forged in solitude and making them real. Again and again, out loud, in the open. The final test of transformation comes when those things that you found alone become shelter, encouragement, or simply an example for others. When who you are, imperfect but sincere, lets a little more light in for everyone else. When you begin to live from that place, your individual journey naturally touches every relationship, every community, every situation you meet. That's the pivotal moment when all that hard work and inner honesty aren't just about you anymore, but quietly radiate out how you move into the world. No showboating, no self-congratulation. Your resilience, humility, and compassion simply ripple outward. You become a beacon not by demanding attention, but by being steady, present, and unmistakably real. Living by these principles isn't like checking off boxes or noting hardships for appearance's sake. It's the daily act of showing up, being genuine instead of just performing, and making room for both your strength and your softness. Each individual choice, yours and anyone else's, lays down a kind of foundation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show by living your life that trust and hope remain possible. This isn't about leadership in the loud sense, but as an invitation, showing through quiet victories and honest defeats how a path can look. Healing and wholeness stop being solitary. They become something quietly woven into each encounter, each relationship, passing along without having to prove anything. At a certain point, you see how transformation ripples out, less in grand moments, more in the daily, steady way your presence influences and lives around you. A gentle word, a patient pause, the courage to stay soft when it would be easier not to be soft, but to be hard or forceful, or to have all the answers. You learn real influence comes only from actually living your truth, not just declaring it, living or just letting your presence speak where words might falter. This steady embodiment draws a line Change doesn't happen all at once or in sweeping declarations, but through dozens of quiet moments and honest connections, each of which reminds someone, maybe even you, that hope and clarity really do have a place in this world. And that's exactly when you begin to feel your life is reaching beyond itself, not pushing or controlling, just naturally becoming a light for others who are learning to stand on their own. So let's get honest about solitude. And I'm not talking about just loneliness. I'm talking about the tough, honest space where the noise falls away and you see yourself for the first time without all those borrowed stories. Like Alan Watts described what happens when there's no more support, no more script, and every outside prop is gone. That's when you find the part of yourself that doesn't crack, your own mountain, your genuine center that doesn't need approval to stand. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent, and it's my Transcendent is my honest effort to map the landscape of human experience in a way that goes deeper than the stories that were handed. What I bring here isn't sanitized theory or motivational fluff. It's born from winding through the wild extremes of what counts as success and the other dark places that people rarely admit to. This was never meant for those stamped with trauma. I mean, truth is, to be human is to bleed a little. Some scars are visible. Others, they just go unspoken. Most of us, sooner or later, feel the urge to stop living inside these blueprints that never quite fit. So I built Transcendent to move beyond borrowed beliefs and meet that original spark that's inside of you that no one else can own. Not a machine, not a culture, not any other person. So where do you start? You start with solitude. The kind that strips away performance, applause, and expectation. And that's where there's finally nothing left to hide behind. Society teaches us to be afraid of that emptiness, to panic at the first signs of stillness. But what if, like Alan Watts suggests, that space is where you discover a strength no support system could ever deliver? When there's no one left to catch you, maybe you realize you can actually stand. You become your own foundation, like the old tree that thrives not because someone tended it, but because it just simply grew. That realization isn't something that isn't soothing at first. It may feel disorienting. The disappearance of support makes room for an uneasy quiet where doubts, fears, and unfinished business can echo loud. But if you step through that discomfort, something else emerges in the silence, your real voice, unscripted by anyone else's agenda. The residue of other people's plans and expectations isn't as sticky as it feels. Beneath it all, there's a self that stays alone in that space, and you're finally ready to find out what's true for you and let that carry you forward. When you reach that point, you don't reject support out of pride or push others away. You just finally stop basing your value on outside sources. The rootedness you find in solitude gives rise to a different urge. You start wanting something deeper, a life that's guided by enduring principles and values rather than the shifting weather of opinion and approval. Solitude strips things down. And in that simplicity, a question rises that can't be ignored. If you're no longer letting others define your worth, then what does guide you? Walking alone isn't the destination, though. It's what sharpens your senses for what actually matters. That's when you find the need for higher principles arrive, not as another rule book, but as a path you choose with your own hands, maybe your heart, your voice, with your full awareness and commitment. It's natural. And that's the real turning point. Solitude is just the beginning. It's the ground that you get honest, but with what you do with that honesty is what matters. When the distractions drop away, then you get to choose which principles define your days and how you'll live them. Not just for your own balance, but as something that might actually ripple out into others in your life, the world, the community, the tribe. Because as you align your life with deeper values, that internal strength and clarity quietly begin to radiate. The shift isn't just for you anymore. It becomes a quiet light for others, a steady presence in the noise. And that's when living your principles starts to turn into something more, a life that not only stands on its own, but also offers shelter, reassurance, and real hope to anyone who's still finding their way. And that's where the journey pivots. Solitude isn't meant to be the end point. It's the foundation. Once the distractions fall away, you're left with the freedom and the responsibility to decide which principles shape the rest of your life. You move simply from wanting peace for yourself to living by values that serve something bigger than just your own comfort. As you keep moving, something changes. Your life starts speaking for itself. The way that you show up day after day, grounded in what matters, begins to do the heavy lifting. The boundaries you once held so close transform into openness, not because you're trying to lead, but because presence naturally draws people. Quiet stability becomes your signature. There's no need to announce it. People just feel the difference in your company, like the space is more solid, the air a little clearer. You watch as others relax, open, or simply breathe easier, and maybe they don't know why. It's because for the first time, they're witnessing someone living out principles rather than just talking about them. The power of solitude, now shaped by higher values, doesn't just hold you up. It becomes a refuge that others sense, not as a performance, but as a steady proof that another way really is possible. When your personal clarity and chosen values meet your life quietly, become the invitation and encouragement others have been searching for, whether they realize it or not. At some point, when you've found through solitude and living by higher values changes more than just your own experience, the real weight of healing and strength shows up in how you move through ordinary days, staying steady when things unravel, offering forgiveness unexpectedly, letting your resilience breathe enough space for grief, courage, and hope all at once. This steady presence isn't about fixing others, earning credit, or becoming some distant role model. It's about showing up authentically, living out those principles in the smallest actions of your life, and trusting others to find their own way in their own time. Real transformation draws no attention to itself. It's felt in the relief of people who notice they can finally take a deeper breath around you and in a moment of quiet support that you didn't even plan to give. Every step you take towards your own wholeness clears a tiny path for someone else and reminds us all that the journey is shared, even when we feel that we're alone. The real victory isn't perfection, it's staying present, refusing to give in to cynicism and moving forward with a kind of hope that doesn't need an audience. You don't need to measure your impact. When you live honestly with your flaws and your clarity, it quietly encourages others to trust their own process. The changes last, the true ones, because they start inside, become habit, and over time invite others to stop hiding too. If your path has wound through loneliness, searching, hard lessons, and slow discovery of personal strength, well, you're not alone. The work you do for yourself does return over and over as a quiet invitation to everyone around you. That's the legacy worth leaving. A life lived so authentically that it helps others believe real connection, healing, and courage are possible for them too. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent. All the best.